This is Pretty Much Pop, a culture podcast. You're not quite sure what we're on about, but you know it's unpleasant. Likewise is the work of director Yorgos Lanthimos, whose latest film, Poor Things, has won some Golden Globes and, as of this recording, has been Oscar-nominated in 11 categories. I'm Mark Lintemeyer, and because I did fall in love, I was not transformed into a dog chicken.
This is Al Baker, born sexy yesterday in the most literal sense.
Poor Things. Graphic sex, corpse stabbing, digestion aids, disfigured faces, brain swapping, animal abuse. What's not to love?
This is Lawrence Ware coming to you from Oklahoma City, and I respect this director, but I fucking hate his films.
Strong. The Oscars will have happened by the time folks hear this, but we wanted something Oscars related, and Poor Things has been getting a lot of buzz. I didn't really connect it with a larger corpus until we were considering doing this, and I remember finding The Lobster interesting and quirky, but ultimately kind of unpleasant, and didn't want to watch it again.
Very unpleasant.
I did watch it again, and I thought it was the most likable. And Poor Things is close. He has the artsy style. Things are drawn out. And of course, we'll talk about the tone and the gratuitous violence and all the gross sex that is in Poor Things in particular and all his films. But watching Dogtooth, and then this morning I actually fit in Alps, his film after Dogtooth, which is even sort of less pleasant, not more violent, but just less enjoyable even than Dogtooth. Yeah, an interesting director. I don't know that I could actually say I like any of these films, but maybe Poor Things. There were definitely, Sarah, your menu actually describes pretty well. Like anything with that much wackiness and such great cinematography and interesting performances. Like this is not the sterile weirdness of his earlier films.
No. This one is
I'm
definitely...
jumping in. No, stop.
Go ahead.
I'm jumping in right now. I need to make my position clear.
All right, Lawrence.
Because I did not want to watch this shit. I didn't want to watch it, right? I believe it was Sarah. It was Sarah's weird ass who really advocated. Wasn't it Sarah?
Wasn't
it you,
it?
Sarah,
Was
who
this my
advocated?
fault?
I think it was you.
All right,
who
I'll take it.
advocated for us. I like horror movies, guys. I like some really depraved things. I really enjoy it. I don't know what it is. It's so like The Killing of Sacred Deer is kind of horror adjacent, right? But I don't know what it is about this particular director. He's a really good director. His cinematography is always good. He's really good with actors. He's really good. It is so deeply unpleasant to watch this stuff. Like it bothered me to my core to watch this stuff. I had to watch Dogtooth. Then I watched Alps, which is like even more disturbing than Dogtooth. Then I watched The Killing of Sacred Deer. The Favorite was fine. I hated Lobster. Poor Things disturbed me. I am not happy, guys. I'm not happy to be here. I'm not happy that you guys are making me do this. I'm not happy that Sarah or Mark or Al, whoever the hell it was, said that we have to do this. I need to make my position clear. I am not going to be happy today. You guys have upset me. Thank you for upsetting me. Thank you.
I don't like horror movies, but I love The Lobster. I watched, like Mark, I watched The Lobster again, and I kind of vowed I was never going to do that, but I loved it. I think it's my favorite of his movies, and I think part of the point of his directing style, and for most of these movies that he's directed, he's also written and produced. The point is to be disgusted, to be put off. I think that's part of it. And I would love to hear, why do you think he does this in his work?
Well, I would love to hear Al's take first before I hear more from Lawrence.
I've had a really bad day because I watched Poor Things this afternoon just before we came on, and God, I can't remember a movie that left me. Oh no, actually, because we watched May December like a month ago,
yeah.
And that also left me with a weird, deep, uncomfortable. Maybe it's just there's something about this year. But The Favorite, which was that this guy's last movie?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
That's the last one.
Is one of my favorite recent movies. I think it's great. I've seen it. I've seen it in a bunch. I love Olivia Colman in it.
It's not as bad.
It's not as bad, but it's more weird than it is uncomfortable. Although a lot of the uncomfortable parts of it are deeply uncomfortable for some of the same reasons that Poor Things gets into. But oh God, was Poor Things hard to watch, especially the first half. And I was pretty kind of stunned and aghast through most of it. I watched a good deal of the movie through my fingers. It's great. I think it definitely achieves what it set out to do, although I'm not 100% sure still what it set out to do. I think I shared Sarah's confusion about you, Lawrence, if like it felt like a horror movie to me. Especially, I'd like some of your take on the cinematography, especially because it seemed to me, my own expert opinion, that a lot of the cinematographic choices were taking cues from like early Gothic movies. There's clearly a Frankenstein motif running through some of it, but I couldn't quite put all the pieces together. Like, super interesting, well-made movie. And made me uncomfortable enough that I think it was right. I hope it was worth it. I think the movie was saying some interesting things, but I'm not quite sure what they are yet.
This morning, I looked at some interview footage with him, and he seems like a pretty fun guy. He seems like he is not super dark in his everyday dealings with people. It seems like he gives his actors a sort of free rein, and that there's a sense of play on the set and things. I assume, from what I heard in this interview, these first 3 films in Greece were pretty much all done just friends. Just make it just like an indie band. Let's just make a film. He had already been very competent as a maker of commercials for a number of years before that. That's what he trained to do. Music videos, things like that. I actually didn't see The Favorite because, well, mostly just for time reasons, but because he didn't write the screenplay, he wasn't involved in the writing in that. And so I sort of, while it would be interesting to see, like, well, what does this director's style look like applied to someone else's material? It seems like it was a little less personal. Maybe it was a step up the commercial ladder of like, here's an opportunity that I was given by someone. Is that why, Lawrence, that one was acceptable to you? Because it's actually not a Yorgos film, really?
It might have been. Like, I find him to be a deeply depraved individual. And it makes me wonder what his sex life is like. Because he appears to be really weird, man. Like, really into some weird stuff. And he's probably perfectly fine in normal settings, but I wonder what he is like behind closed doors. So the stuff that it reminds me of really is like the Hammer horror films of the 1950s, 1960s. And The Curse of Frankenstein in particular is what I picked up on when it came to Poor Things. Because The Curse of Frankenstein is a Hammer horror film that kind of deals with similar stuff, but like that's kind of the vibe that I got from this film. So Al, I think that's what you're pointing at, that there's something going on there, and that's what I picked up. I didn't pick up like the traditional Universal horror films that he's playing with. I got the Hammer horror films. That's kind of the vibe that I got. Now, horror films, when you watch Freddy, when you watch Jason, when you watch Michael Myers, yeah, there's death. Yeah, that's gore. But there's like a level of fun, right? Like there's like a little bit of fun, cheekiness to it, right? Halloween films, cheekiness to it. Even ghost stories, like you get scared and then you laugh. There's like some cheekiness to it. I think what disturbs me about his films is that this guy is just he's horror and he's unsettling, and there's like, it makes you so deeply uncomfortable. And that's what bothers me. Like, I'm not a gore guy. I don't like a lot of gore. There's like random bits of really weird sex and goriness to his films. Maybe I'm a vanilla guy. Maybe I'm vanilla. Maybe that's what it is. And I like traditional sex. I don't know. But I don't like his sexual stuff. Like, I don't like the sexual stuff that he's bringing into the film. Like, it just makes me so deeply uncomfortable. It makes me so unhappy, so uncomfortable. And it makes me think that maybe the Oscars like films that are unsettling and uncomfortable. But then you have Oppenheimer. I don't know. I don't like these films. I don't like them. I understand why they are nominated. They're very high craftsmanship. The Favorite is an example of him doing really, really cool, weird stuff with someone else's material. But when he uses his own material, it's just like weird and it's unsettling and it makes me unhappy and it makes me come home and hug my puppy. I'm very unhappy when I watch his films.
by the way, he did not write Poor Things. It's based on a novel, a 1992 novel. And then there was also a guy helped him write the screenplay. So this is not his own material either. I disagree with you, Lawrence. I think that there's a lot of humor. He is definitely not subtle. He is not subtle at all.
I guess I don't like his brand of humor. I guess that's what it is.
Right. No, I get it. Poor Things is supposed to be a sex positive feminist.
Did you laugh?
Absolutely. I laughed.
Al, did you laugh?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Mark, you laughed? You laughed, Mark. You laughed.
You shouldn't judge my reaction.
Mark, did you laugh? Yes or no? Give me an answer, goddammit.
I don't remember.
Did you laugh?
I don't recall. I found parts of it delightful. I found it very like Candide.
I saw him trying to be funny, and I was so upset and disgusted by it that I didn't laugh. I'm sorry, guys. You guys have a different sense of humor than I do.
So the shape of the film, I felt, was like Candide. You know, once you got past the initial romping around, and I just watched Dogtooth and things, and I was sort of ready for there are going to be these long camera things. The whole beginning of the film didn't have talking. I'll admit that I needed to be sucked in a little bit. But by the time she was actually talking, and especially when it sort of got a little philosophical, I really liked it. I really liked there aren't a lot of films that sort of do this philosophy in the loose sense. What is my take on what we're supposed to be doing on this earth and whether we should be nice to each other or not? And as a travelogue, and yeah, I don't know. The whole second half of the film especially worked very well for me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Was it laugh out loud funny? I don't know that I can say yes.
Poor Things? Sometimes, yeah. I mean, Mark Ruffalo was hilarious.
Yeah.
I thought his character was he was so funny. In fact, I don't know if I've seen him funnier elsewhere. He was really, really good in this part. But I think all of his movies have a lot of kind of sick humor about it. I mean, Dogtooth, there were some parts of that movie where I was laughing when he had the children acting like dogs and barking. That's funny. That is funny. The Lobster in certain areas is really, really funny. And it can be funny and really disturbing at the same time, which is pretty hard to do, but this seems like something that is well within this director's wheelhouse.
He likes to create, I mean, especially in Poor Things, is just like the main thing I was thinking about through it is that the horror comes from sex and power. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why it's both so interesting and distinct and also uncomfortable in the particular way it is. Because in the first half of Poor Things, have we done the plot?
You want to do the plot, Al? You're good at those.
Does the plot even matter?
The plot matters a lot because the movie is about a woman who committed suicide and then was brought back to life by a mad scientist, not just as herself, but by implanting the brain of the still living fetus she was pregnant with when she died into her brain. And we follow her development from someone with an infant's brain in a fully grown person's body into an adult woman's brain in, I guess, a slightly older version of the body that she would have had. The movie doesn't make total sense in...
Oh, no. Improbably sophisticated in a very short time, in a matter of months.
Yeah, that's the broad outline. But what it turns the movie into is a really horrifically gruesome exploration of feminist tropes in movies. That's what I took this from, because you explicitly set this main character up as someone who has the body of a grown woman, but the mind of a child. And most of the action of the movie comes from the men who surround this woman and how they decide they're going to take advantage of her and what happens next. And then how she goes about crafting a sense of autonomy for herself, especially in the second half. But in that sense, I think the plot is very important because it really it sets up everything else about the film. Like the intense discomfort in the first half when you see her being treated as a sexual object by men who know perfectly well that she has a 6-month-old brain, into the stuff that Mark was talking about when she develops, as you say, implausibly quickly into a sophisticated intellectual. But the way that she interacts with different men and the women in her life is all explored through this prism of the fact that she is a literal child in the body of a sexualized adult.
Which is where most of the controversy is coming from. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that it had such quite high audience score. I assumed that it would the Rotten Tomatoes would be high critical score, but poor audience score. But it was, 79% when I looked up audience score that people are enjoying this. But, there is a lot of gross sex in it. And I've sort of, in being introduced to this film, was like, the poor things are, Emma Stone having to have gone through making this movie. But actually, she seems pretty delighted about the whole thing.
I mean, she's a really good actress and she's good in the movie. I was kind of shocked that she did some of this stuff. I don't know if I think she'll win the Oscar for it. Like, Lily Gladstone is really coming on strong. Won the SAG Awards. I really think Lily Gladstone's going to win. I'm happy about that. She's really good in that film. But Emma, she's really good in this film. She's really good. She does a really good performance. It's a brave performance. I was kind of like, were you guys shocked at all that she was doing some of this stuff? Or are you guys just so jaded that you don't notice this stuff anymore?
I think Emma Stone got into I think everyone got into this project knowing that they were going to make a weird ass film.
Oh, yeah.
They clearly just had the time of their lives, just giving themselves over to the director and letting him mess with them. Like,
she clearly trusts this director. Like, she clearly trusts this guy.
Yeah, she does. And I think it's a great exploration of what female sexuality is, even though I have to admit it's kind of a bummer that this was directed by a male, the screenwriter was a male, and even the novelist is a male. That's a bit of a bummer, but I thought that her portrayal of Bella Baxter as someone who was just absolutely devoid of any sort of shame was delightful, especially in, it's sort of roughly set in kind of the Victorian era where the sexual mores of the time were definitely coded and they were constricted and there were hard and fast rules for women especially, and also for men. And it was really fun seeing a character like Bella Baxter who just doesn't have any shame. She enjoys sex. She is absolutely so free in her body. It was really fun to see that character played up against the rules of society during that time. I thought that was a really great juxtaposition, and that made it for me an enjoyable experience. I really, really liked this character, but there is no one like this character. I mean, there is no one else. Even the other woman that the Willem Dafoe character creates is not as sharp as Bella Baxter. She doesn't develop as quickly. Her brain doesn't develop as quickly as Bella Baxter. So Bella Baxter is in my view, a really special character.
And they don't talk in the monotones.
No.
From the previous movies.
Except for the comedian, Carmichael. He does. The guy, he's the one on the boat. He has that weird affective monotone, but everybody else has their own voice.
And that felt like a callback to his earlier films. Like that felt like something him like just kind of inserting that, just let you know, I'm the guy who did this.
Yeah, I agree. Especially when they're talking about philosophy.
And that's how philosophers talk, like that monotonous, boring way of talking.
Is that right? Oh, okay.
That's exactly how philosophers talk.
Okay, I'm going to remember that.
Well, usually when they're talking in that style in the films, it's very mundane things. And then until there's a sudden burst of violence or weird sex, like that is the, that we're going to make it so sort of realistic in the dialogue and just mundane and boring. Realistic is probably not the word because these people are sort of aggressively boring. In Dogtooth, I don't even want to give the plot because like you have to piece together like what the hell is going on here? Why are these people like this? And it sort of only becomes clear like how this is a centrally abusive situation for these main characters.
Yeah.
Would this have been a film you guys sought out if it had not been nominated for an Oscar? Like, would you have looked to watch this if it had not been pushed upon you, thrust upon you by the
Absolutely.
Oscars? Really?
Nice
I was
choice
excited to watch. I was excited to watch this movie because of The Favourite, because it was the next collaboration from this group of people.
Yeah, me too. Like I said, I loved The Lobster. I loved The Favourite as well. And I really liked Poor Things, but I did not like Killing of a Sacred Deer, I have to say. That one was my least favorite, I think, of the ones that I've watched by him. I've seen that story so many times, It's like, oh, this is just Cape Fear.
You've seen that story so many times?
That particular story, yeah, it was like Cape Fear.
Yeah, it has echoes of Cape Fear. It absolutely does. Yeah,
Cape,
it does.
Cape Fear, except that the antagonist will not raise his hand physically against you at all because he's some sort of sorcerer, completely unexplained.
It's still Cape Fear, but with like black magic.
Yeah. I mean, and that's another thing that I like about his movies too, is that he doesn't have to explain everything. I mean, he's not subtle, but at the same time, this is the world, take it or leave it,
Alps, I had to actually look at, after I just this morning watched it, was looking at the wiki for the plot because I didn't understand. Just to give you the premise, these people are sort of a theater troupe. There's 4 of them, and they volunteer and then charge money to when they sort of like ambulance chasers. So they stalk when somebody has died. Then they go up to the family like, hey, I can help ease your grief by playing the part of your departed. I'll come over to your house a few times a week. And then after 4 sessions, I'll charge you. And so it's about the relationship of these people to their roles, which are quite underdeveloped. And the thing that I had to look up on Wikipedia is because the main character, who is also the oldest of the children from Dogtooth, there are scenes of her at her house with her actual father. But I didn't know for most of the film. Maybe you're not supposed to know. Maybe you're not supposed to know at all whether this is her actual family or this is a role she is playing.
Oh, wow.
That sounds like a Nathan Fielder show.
It is an incredibly weird movie. Like, I watch weird stuff, guys. Like, I watch a lot of stuff. This is by far the most unpleasant. I genuinely don't know what it is because I'm kind of shocked. I thought I would have like one person. I thought Al. Like, I thought I can rely on Al to come on here and kind of have my kind of sentiment. Like, I knew that Sarah was weird. We all knew that. I know that Mark was weird. We all know that. But I thought Al was like normal. I thought Al would be like with me. But I am like the only person on here who's like really disgusted and really bothered by this stuff.
Then I would like to know, is there value in the way that he presents?
Yes, there is
stories?
value. Listen, I'm going to defend an artist's right to do what they want to do with their art. And he is provocative and he's very skilled. He's very good. It's just, can we get a normal movie? Like normal. Like even the favorite's not normal. Like it's just not
we get tons of normal movies.
Give me a good movie that makes me feel good leaving the theater. Like, why do I always have to be disgusted?
Why would Poor Things does not a tragedy?
No, it is
Poor
so
Things
unpleasant.
has a happy ending.
It's so unpleasant to get to that happy ending that, like, I'm so disgusted that the happy ending doesn't hit. Help me out, guys. Help me out.
The thing is, it's interesting. And the most interesting... So, yeah, The Favourite was a slightly more normal movie, but all the most interesting... all the stuff I remember from The Favourite is tonally similar to the way that Poor Things is all the way through. Especially, and to bring it up again, just the kind of tension and drama that he gets out of awkward power dynamics in sexual relationships. So, in The Favourite, but there's this weird relationship between the queen and her maidservant, her favorite, or like her court favorite.
Yeah.
And it develops into a weird sexual relationship, which is definitely abusive. But what's interesting about the movie is it plays with which party is abusing the other and to what extent and in what ways. I really think that's just what this guy likes playing with. I didn't see Alps and I didn't see Dogtooth. Do both of those involve like abusive sexual relationship, like
absolutely
complicatedly abusive sexual relationships too?
Yeah.
Dogtooth for sure does.
Horribly. I didn't see his first film. It would be very surprising to me if this was not a theme through his early. So Canetta 2005, My Best Friend 2001. So there are 2 earlier ones that I didn't get around to seeing, and I don't know that I will seek them out.
It's unusual, or actually, I take that back. It's not necessarily unusual, but he has such a distinctive voice, and that is kind of what I appreciate about him. Even if I don't like everything that he's doing, and actually I do like most of the stuff that he's doing, but even if he's not to your taste, you can't argue that he doesn't have a really, really distinctive voice in this space, and that is really, really valuable, especially when we've got, Marvel movie after Marvel movie. I mean, and we all love superhero movies and stuff, but good grief. Personally, I like having, a distinctive voice in the film space.
What's going on, guys? This is Lawrence dropping in real fast to just let you guys know about Factor, something I'm very excited about. Eating better is easy with Factor's delicious, ready-to-go meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted and dietitian approved and ready to go in just like 2 minutes. It's fast. And you'll have over 35 different options to choose from every week, including Calorie Smart for those of you who want to slim down, Protein Plus for those of you who are in the gym trying to get your bulk on, and there's more than 60 add-ons to help you stay fueled up and feeling good all day long. What are you waiting for? Get started today and go after your goals. Do me a favor. Go to factormeals.com/Pretty50 and use code Pretty50 to get 50% off. That's code Pretty50 at factormeals.com/Pretty50 to get 50% off. Go there, use the code. I promise you'll thank me later.
To Lawrence's question, the point about why is this movie winning Oscars is because this guy's clearly an unashamedly pretentious filmmaker. He's got all this, the big chunks of the movie are in black and white. He's got these long cinematic pauses. There's probably references to 2 or 3 dozen classic films in there that in Poor Things that I didn't see. I imagine one reason why he's so popular with the Academy is that he's making capital P pretentious films and being very unashamed about it.
Yeah, the art film thing, it's a mode that I can go into, but it's always a little bit of an adjustment of you just got to surrender and we're just hanging out with these people for a while. It wasn't that stark in Poor Things just because that is such a presentation of a fairy tale, basically. It's some sort of fable. And so that is not, you don't mix that with a 5-minute dinner scene where nobody talks.
Right. No, and you know what? That's such a good point, Mark, because in Poor Things you have, and maybe it is because it was based on a novel, that it has that character arc. We have, it's something that you can kind of, if not predict, you actually kind of, you know where it's going. Whereas he really plays with your expectations and all of the stuff that he writes. Like Dogtooth, I had no idea where that was going. I had no idea where the Lobster was going. And that for me is pretty fun. I like that. But with Poor Things, I really got a sense, I thought it was too long, but I got a sense of where this character was going, which I appreciated. Even with all of his weirdness, he really stuck to a specific story structure, even with different parts. There's a part 1 and part 2. I like him.
I mean, this is the most conventional of his films by far, the structure of it. And you guys are right that it has this art. He's an art house filmmaker, but he takes his stuff to the extreme. When it comes to the violence or just the gore, the sexuality, he takes it to the extreme. Because art house films do tend to be a little bit more freer with their sexuality, but he really takes it to the extreme. So I do appreciate that. I do really, really like that this particular film is so well structured. It is extremely well structured. You know the beginning, the middle, and the end. You understand what he's up to. It's just so unpleasant. And that's really what's repelling me. And I'm just not a guy who likes that unpleasantness, but he really wallows in it. Even though he gives you a happy ending at the end, he wallows in that unpleasantness. And that's where it really turns me off. And so I'm beginning to realize that it's just my own personal proclivity. There's certain things that really get to me. And he, for some reason, is a artist who really likes to hit my buttons. Mm-hmm. For some people, they're able to watch that stuff, and Al's able to watch it through his fingers, but he ends up enjoying it. I'm a person who watches it through his fingers, but it's so unpleasant that it leaves me with a bad taste at the end.
The marker for me of whether a film like this is good or not is whether I feel like the unpleasantness is worth it, is worth that the movie was trying to do something or communicate something or tell some kind of story that's worth being made to feel horrible for. Like when we discussed May December, it was a similar thing there. I was just trying to make sure that the movie had enough substance that it was worth what it put me through. And I think Poor Things does. I would feel less good about it if I felt like it was just a gross out dark comedy. I really think it was exploring some very underexplored areas of like sexuality and psychology that I can't remember other movies doing in the same way.
In all of his movies, he sort of goes into like really taboo areas. Like like animal abuse has been something like a constant, and child abuse, that, and he's very graphic with that. And it's disturbing. I watch that stuff through my fingers too, but I don't think that it's there just to shock you. I think it's there to serve a purpose in his, thematically in his work. And specifically, like in Poor Things, you've got a character who is really kind of fighting against some of these social constructs. And you have to do that in this movie. At least he has to do that in this movie in a really graphic, unsubtle way in order to make us pay attention to this character.
Do we think that compassion can be discovered out of nothing? I think that is sort of what is being explored in this movie, that you could start with completely amoral, and that just by doing a little reading, I mean, the moment at some point she goes from completely just self-absorbed and why wouldn't I just, you found a frog on the ground, kill it for my amusement. That kind of childish cruelty to, wow, I'm seeing the suffering in the world and I'm overwhelmed by it and I should sacrifice myself to that. And that's just a transitional thing to a more mature, I realize that, not to give away, I don't think this is a very central thing, but, she discovers a little about what her dead mother was like, and that she and her husband were cruel. And I'm going to make a decision to not be that. And that is an open question. That is something that the philosopher character that we're referring to just says, no, everybody is underlyingly cruel. We just think of ways to deny that. But yet this sort of childlike innocence, we get the two sides of it, of on the one hand being a bleeding heart and on the other hand being, thoughtlessly, there is no childlike innocence. The childlike state is utter cruelty. And that's something you have to discover is morality and compassion.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also something that the Mark Ruffalo character thinks is society's job is to make sure that we are not all assholes all the time, selfish assholes, that those rules are put into place for a reason. And I think that this movie is really kind of fighting against that idea.
That's all really interesting because it does speak to the central idea of the movie is this main character who's defined at all times by, what she's expected to do by various powerful figures who like surround her and try and abuse her or manipulate her or whatever. And her journey in the movie is about trying to define herself against that. And I was thinking about that, the philosopher character, when you were talking about him earlier, because I was trying to decide for myself whether he was one of the characters who was trying to abuse her or whether he was like on her side. Like, was he trying to just inculcate her into his way of thinking just because she was vulnerable and he saw an opportunity to do that? Or was it a genuinely helpful moment? And it's interesting that she eventually decides to distance herself from his viewpoint, which is another way that she kind of discovers her own autonomy in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Everyone is trying to control her, in some way, and she won't be controlled. And that's what, that was certainly Mark Ruffalo's downfall.
I mean, I guess along with the improbable maturation, just I'm basically a 4-year-old and I'm just going to insist on going out into the world on my own and walking around. And yet somehow I don't just immediately get lost. And she finds her way back, there's a reference to this. I was concerned from a parental point of view.
Right. Her brain is developing at a much faster pace than it would in real life. And wasn't it like you could sort of mark her development by the length of her hair? So, as her hair grew, and her hair grew really, really fast throughout the time span of the movie, and her brain actually ends up catching up with her biological age of her body pretty quickly. So you can see her go through, like in the early stages, she goes through the baby and the toddler stage, like really, really fast. And then she becomes that petulant teenager pretty quickly, but she's not a 4-year-old walking around Lisbon. She was, I think at that point, late teens, early 20s, somewhere around there.
She could exchange in commerce, for instance. I just didn't even think at that point, like, oh, you can just take things. that would be her attitude. Because this is what the movie had been telling me before, that she's so ignorant of even just fundamental things because she's never been let out in the world. Never had to like deal with anything that wasn't just specifically catered to her. So, being exposed to a society. I don't know what my trouble is with this. It's just, if it's supposed to be saying something deep about what a stranger in a strange land would figure out about, it's like one of these alien movies, Resident Alien. I was watching that show, and there's all this just the ongoing comedy of like, what, you're not allowed to do that? And, I just felt like either they would milk that more. It just bypassed a number of those things and potential comments that could have been made that I expected from a movie with a character like this.
I feel like the story is much more like Frankenstein than one of those things. And I'm remembering the novel now, and how the creature in Frankenstein is also very, very quickly becomes a very erudite intellectual figure. And I can't remember if they bother explaining like how or why that happens. Just that it does.
From him running around in the woods by himself.
Yeah.
Have you guys heard the comparison between Poor Things, like Bella Baxter, and Barbie? Have you heard of this?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Like
I haven't.
that there are some parallels there?
I can see it, though. This is like a more graphic Barbie. Yeah, sure.
It's like a more graphic Barbie. Yeah, but it is sort of taking somebody with the brain of a child, basically, or brain of a toy, and thrusting them out in the real world and seeing what happens, and see how they...
Exposing them to the patriarchy and see how they...
Exposing them to the patriarchy,
cope.
Exactly. Yeah.
The question is, who's the better Barbie, Margot Robbie or Emma Stone? That's the real question.
It's just, I guess in both circumstances, I find them so constructed, these environments. So we're not actually exposing the character to the real world. We're exposing them to the very heavy-handed way that the director or the writers want to present this and make a particular point. It's probably less subtle in Barbie that they're actively patriarchy, making jokes about it, whereas Poor Things is less overtly self-aware, is less postmodern, is more playing with a again, I see the genre being Candide, of this the travelogue of the innocent with a sometime philosopher companion being shown the world and trying to come to terms with how should you react in the face of the brutishness of people.
Get reading.
Right. The final act that I referred to before. So this is going to definitely get spoilery, where she decides, I guess I do want to find out who this person was, who my mother was, essentially, and finds that it's more of the same or worse, that this entirely socially approved of form of possessiveness and cruelty, that she's just, I'm going to have no part of that. That's you can try to shoot me. It's fine. But
yeah, how do you feel about this movie coming out now? Coming out at a time when women are losing their autonomy once again, that we're not allowed to make as many choices about our own bodies once again. And I don't know when he started shooting this movie, but it does seem like the timing of this is also another reason why it's gotten such attention.
I think something this filmmaker does that I'm thinking again about The Favourite is complicating the idea that the solution to like the patriarchy particularly, but like sexualized power dynamics in general, is women's choices. And this is maybe an interesting contrast with the Barbie movie, because when we talked about it, one of the things that the Barbie movie struggled with was coming up with like what its own coherent like feminist philosophy was. But between The Favourite and Poor Things, it seems like one of the things the movies are trying to say is that it's the structures that these people find themselves living in that limit the choices they're able to make, the freedom that they have, and limit the impact of the choices that they're able to make. So in Poor Things, for instance, Emma Stone is like, I'm liberated now. What are my choices? I can be a prostitute. Great. How liberating. To your point, Sarah Lynn, I think the reason it feels so timely is that it like really complicates the idea of what it is to be free or to be liberated, and like just how subtle, nuanced and many the challenges are to being able to actually be an autonomous person given like the world that you find yourself in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, the film was filmed from August to December of 2021. So that's before they overturned Roe v. Wade. But I do think that this is kind of evergreen material. Like, it's always a threat for women to lose their bodily autonomy. It just so happens that this is coming out at a particularly hot topic in America and in a very kind of contentious election cycle. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's an evergreen. I think it's an evergreen topic. I don't think there's ever a bad time to talk about this. I just think that this is really hitting a really hot spot. And though I do find it unpleasant, I did not enjoy watching it. I do think it's important. I think it's worthy of being made. I think it's worth being seen by some people. One of the things that really did bother me is that the sexuality is so gratuitous. It made me concerned that some people might go in there with ill intentions to watch this, if that makes any sense. Like, I want to see her naked and see some weird sex. Let me just watch it without. That's always just a danger, and that worried me. But it's a small worry. But I do think that the subject matter is very, very apropos. It's important to talk about this stuff, particularly right now. I just wish it was made in a way that's a little bit more approachable, because I do worry that we will watch the film and talk about it. I don't know how much everyday regular people, the Academy, yes, but regular everyday people just watching this film, they need to watch it. They need to be confronted with these ideas. I'm just not sure that they are. I think it's going to be such a turnoff that they're going to be walking out the theater. And many people have walked out the theater because it's such a turnoff, the way they present it.
Do you think that the audience for this, that they're just kind of preaching to the choir? Like, this is your NPR listening?
I think so. I do think so. Yes, absolutely. And the film nerds like us who are really interested in the film work and the film making and all that kind of stuff, like, they'll sit through it. But the real people who they really do need to reach, because I think that the message is it's pretty important, but the real people that they need to reach, they're not going to reach them because they're going to be turned off by a lot of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's just the risk that you take when you are a filmmaker like this.
Well, at least they all went to go see Barbie.
They definitely went to see Barbie. They went to see Barbie.
I guess I'm not convinced that the message itself is intrinsically innovative or valuable. I know we sort of talked about when a film gets philosophical at all, like, ooh, that's cool, that's wonderful, but like, judged as philosophy, like, I don't regard this particularly highly or clearly.
It's definitely not innovative, but I would say it's important. But innovative, no. I mean, many feminist philosophers kind of made this point in other areas, but innovative, no. Important, yeah. I still think it's important.
So I would say, for instance, Dogtooth is a social critique. All right, I'll sort of give what the general framework is, which is that this father with grown children has decided to infantilize them, and that he has some weird view of him, romantic view of what the family is. And so that, these adults will remain perpetually children. They'll never be allowed to leave the grounds. And because the son in particular has sexual needs, then he brings in a woman to satisfy that. And well, when that doesn't work out, now we're going to encourage incest, not just encourage, but like make this happen, which ends up being a breaking point and certainly one of the grosser parts of this whole thing. And these kids have been so sheltered that when one of them gets her hands on some videotapes, so it's Rocky 4 and Jaws, or Jaws 2 or something.
And Flashdance.
Flashdance, right? Yes. That these are just...
That was funny!
Really hilarious. That by presenting this extreme situation, I think was getting at the kind of codependency and control and like what real patriarchy amounts to, because it's actually being, I'm going to say being subtle in its message, because the situation is presenting is obviously not a normal situation. So you could say this is no relevant, but just straight up saying, oh yeah, women, every man you'll run into will explicitly say, and this is, another Yorgos thing, is that he just has characters just say what they would never actually say, right? What they would, like, if you don't do what I want, then I will kill you repeatedly. Like, is that the message? It seems like the problems with patriarchy now are much more subtle than that. It's not, the men standing over you and saying, do what I want or I will kill you. But it's that, you have been conditioned and mind fucked into seeing yourself as inferior. And these much more weird codependencies and things like that's what we need to explore, and the decolonization, as it were, rather than the explicit big bad wolf.
Mm-hmm. Even though he says the quiet parts out loud, that's still the same message. That's the same message that women feel. That's the same message that you still receive, is that if I don't control you, you are going to be sorry. You're going to be hurt, or you could even be killed. Whereas if the reverse is true, the woman says something to the man, his feelings are hurt. He says that stuff out loud. His characters say that stuff out loud, but that is absolutely the message anyway. That's loud and clear.
I also think it's probably asking too much for movies to be like philosophically interesting as such. It's really hard to make a movie.
I completely agree.
And it's really hard to come up with an original philosophical idea. So I don't expect my philosophical movies to be able to do both at once. But if you can explicate a philosophical idea in a filmically interesting way, then that's A+ for me. And I think that's what Poor Things did. The overall political message of the movie maybe isn't the most subtle thing in the world, but I've never seen it explicated in that way, and it's done in a way which draws attention to movies. I think it presents a critique of movies and the way they treat certain kinds of women characters in general as well, and that is also interesting, like over and above the general societal critique. So you have these, I kept thinking of The Fifth Element, right, which is a movie that I love, but has come rightly under a lot of criticism for the way that it handles Lilu. And it's like the version of the Born Sexy Yesterday trope in like the modern film era. And one of the things that I thought was most interesting about Poor Things was it seemed to be commenting like directly on those kinds of characters in movies, and on like the limits of treating those as liberating or progressive kinds of characters.
Anything else about any of these movies that we wanted to get into before we wrap up here?
I hated all of them. That's my closing thought. I did not like any of them. I hated all of them. I hate you for making me watch it.
I so appreciate his voice. I hope he continues to make movies, and I will probably be first in line to watch him.
Lots of really good films recently have been very good at making me feel very bad, but not necessarily in ways that I feel bad about feeling. And I'm interested in that. That's good.
Do we want to see Poor Things too? No, I know we often talk about like what's
Poor
next.
Things, yeah.
What's next from the apparently he's already shot another film, so there'll be something that's out.
Kinds of Kindness. Yeah.
I mean, he's going to get to do like exactly what he wants for a while, because this movie was such a big critical darling, right? We're going to get more weird movies from him, not less.
Love it.
What made this the most ordinary of them is it was more clearly playing with genre stuff. I know you guys are saying that Killing of a Sacred Deer is playing with the Cape Fear genre, or that maybe one of the videos I was watching about it mentioned it as a tragedy, and that even though while that movie is happening, you don't quite know where it's going. When it does resolve, you're just like, oh, this was entirely where it was aimed the whole time, and it's a sort of a classic Greek tragedy of the hubris of somebody, with some funny parts along the way. Alicia Silverstone has a great thing
She's
as
great
a
in that
weird,
movie.
desperate mother for a scene. I feel like Dogtooth is just such an original concept, and Alps,
Good concept.
though maybe not as well as executed.
Terrible film.
A completely original concept. And I want more of those things. If what it makes him to make a normal film is to play with genres more, like I'd sort of rather he just spitball.
Has he made one?
The Favorite.
The favorite is so quirky
it's a love
and
triangle.
weird. It is not normal.
Just a standard love triangle movie.
It is
standard.
not.
What would you like to see him do? Which he will not do. You know,
I want
a
to
Marvel
see an action movie. Let me see an action movie.
No.
Give me a Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 3 directed by this guy. I will probably love it. It's going to be some gratuitous violence, but I will probably love it.
He'll do the Jabba the Hutt spinoff for Star Wars.
That sounds great. That sounds great.
He should do like a buddy cop movie.
Let's go. Lethal Weapon 5. Bad Boys 4. Let's do something. The audience cannot see me, but they are so mad at me. I am so mad. I want you guys, the people cannot see me, but I am so mad that you guys made me watch this stuff and made me talk about it.
This whole episode.
Oh my gosh.
You're asking for the buddy
upset.
cop movie where one cop ruthlessly, sexually, and psychologically brutalizes the other buddy cop.
It might be like Bad Lieutenant Part 3.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yes.
That's what it would be.
All right. On that wonderful note, I think we have 3 recommendations to see this movie for most people. For not for everybody. Not for most people.
Thumbs up for me.
For people that got to the end of this discussion.
Do not watch this movie. I'm sorry. Don't watch it. You're going to watch this. You're going to be disgusted. You're going to see a whole bunch of graphic nudity and sexuality, and you're going to be very upset that you watch this film. Don't listen to Mark. Don't listen to Al. Don't listen to Sarah. They are petite bourgeois film critics. If you want someone who is on the ground like you, listen to me. Don't watch this film.
All right, Mr. Professor. Very, very, very relatable. Let's wrap up before we say things we regret. We can say it in the after talk. Please go to patreon.com/prettymuchpop and you can hear us talking more in a second.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
So long.
Bye.